Hello, my name is Declan, and today I will be talking to you about a study titled Performance Benefits of Depression, Sequential Decision Making in a Healthy Sample and a Clinically Depressed Sample. This study was conducted in 2011 by a researcher named von Helversen, and this study outlines information regarding how populations process information and make decisions. So, major depressive disorder is one of the most common mental health issues worldwide, with some researchers debating how depression actually impacts cognition. Fully understanding this concept will help a substantial amount of people worldwide and is a concept which should always be pushed to be better understood. Some research suggesting depression has shown inhibition in higher order cognitive tasks such as reasoning and decision making. Rumination, which is the repetitive thinking or dwelling on negative feelings, is often what is suggested explains these deficits. Furthermore, when researchers have limited rumination, depressed samples seem to perform better in tasks assigned, suggesting there is actually a complex relationship between depression and cognitive function. In this study, there was a total of 54 participants. Participants that are part of the depressed study group were sampled from the Medical Clinic for Internal Medicine and Psychosomatics at the Charité Hospital in Berlin. The control sample was then matched by gender, age, and education to have no major differences between samples. Participants also had to undergo screening questionnaires. The German version of the Beck Depression Inventory and the Patient Health Questionnaire was prescribed to the depressed and healthy samples. The healthy sample completed these questionnaires after testing was actually done, and the depressed group received testing upon admittance to the hospital and for a second time 2 days before testing was done. After the second round of screening questionnaires, the depressed sample was actually split into two subcategories, one being depressed and one being a recovery subgroup, as multiple participants had shown improvements on their questionnaires. So in the end, the depressed sample contained a total of 15 participants, the recovery sample contained 12, and the control sample contained a total of 27 participants. So the framework used in this study is a sequential choice task known as the secretary problem. Basically, the participant has to pick the best applicant for the job out of a sequentially presented pool of applicants. Once you say no to one, you cannot recall them, and previous research has suggested this paradigm accurately represents human behaviour and decision making. Now, there has been a gold standard suggestion for success in this particular task. This involves choosing a threshold of acceptance, and after a suitable number of applicants have already been presented, once you have chosen said threshold of acceptance, the next applicant which surpasses it should be the one that's chosen. In this particular study, an applicant pool of 40 was presented in a random order. If the participant hadn't chosen an applicant, the last one presented to them was automatically their choice. So overall, the findings of this study suggest that depressed groups had a higher threshold for acceptance, while healthy participants set their threshold too low, resulting in suboptimal performance. Sequential decision-making potentially models a class of problem where depression leads to an increase in performance. Researchers suggested that their threshold was close to optimal, meaning the depressed sample perceived quality of options more accurately. This further suggests that depressive populations have a desire to control situations, increasing analytical information processing. This offsets the negative effects depression has on cognitive functioning. What's interesting about this finding is that the researchers obviously asked their participants for their threshold goals before testing. Pre-testing threshold goals showed no significant differences between the groups, outlining this process may actually be subconscious, and the increase in threshold is coming from the increase in threshold in the depressed group is actually coming from an inability to disengage from the task or potentially another cognitive process at play. The addition of the recovery group allowed understanding to be gathered regarding clinical versus non-clinical populations, and the researchers were actually able to draw the conclusion of only acute and severe states of depression showing this increase in acceptance threshold. Now, there are multiple limitations to this study. The sample size was really small, being only 54 participants. There was also a lack of a clinical control group, suggesting other psychopathologies may show similar results. Participants in the depressive and recovery samples had received medication since they had been admitted to hospital, which could have potentially influenced their cognitive process. Further, there was only one definition of major depressive disorder, and further study is needed to understand performance in clinical settings subject to multiple diagnoses of depressive disorder. Overall, the study chooses a paradigm which has been used in various empirical investigation and has proven a strong framework for understanding cognitive performance. Individuals with major depressive disorder set a higher threshold for acceptance in sequential decision-making tasks due to a desire to increase control, thus improving their analytical information processing. The addition of the recovery group allowed researchers to outline that this higher threshold was only seen in acute or severe depressive samples. The research continues to add to the existing literature and does provide some direction for future research, especially regarding clinical populations and having a clinical control group. Thank you for all listening. I hope you all learned something.